very easy method to secure logs. Most swing blade sawmill owners will use these. It's just a simple log bunk with a 6-inch wide notch cut out of it. The two edges support and cradle the log so it can't slide left or right. It's all that's required to hold the log. So here we have your sawmill in pieces ready to assemble. You've got your 2 base skids, your 2 posts, your carriage, chainsaw, beam, and water bottle. Okay, we've already positioned the beam next to our log just to set the spacing correctly. Now we're grabbing the operator end base skid. Note the sizer is on the left side and the stickers on the beam are also on the left side for orientation. Now we're placing the far end skid on the ground at the end of the beam. Alright, so now we grab the operator post. This simply slides onto that tube above the skid. No bolts to retain it. Take note, orientation, chain to the right, and the 2 stubs aligning to the face of the beam. Okay, now we can slide on the other post. Alright, so we'll just need to lift the beam up and slide it onto the 3 stubs of the post casting. Now that we've attached the far end of the beam, we can raise the other end up and rest it on the actual log. This is so we can slide the carriage onto the beam. 2 people can carry the carriage pretty easily. If you're wanting to carry the carriage by yourself, you're going to have to remove the horizontal guard, the blade, chainsaw, and probably the push handle just to make it a little bit lighter for you. Okay, so we've got the carriage onto the beam now. Now we're going to simply slide the operator end frame onto the beam, onto the spigot, and then bolt it together. Okay, now we have the operator end frame attached. We've basically assembled the complete frame. So now it's just a matter of raising the saw up so we can start looking at adjustments. Just before you raise the saw, make sure the track brake is applied. That'll lock the carriage from moving forward and back as you raise and lower the frame. Also note that the end post clamps need to be unlocked when you raise the machine. It's important to note that if these locks remain locked while you lift the unit, you're putting stress on the chain. So always unlock and lock as you raise and lower the machine. Here's a 395 XP with an AX34 belt. We have the mounting plate, 2 spanners, an 18 and a 19, a 13 socket spanner, a flathead screwdriver to mount the remote throttle, and the bolts to secure the plate. So now we've mounted the chainsaw plate. It's raised as high as it can go on the slot. And also note that it's aligned to the center of the pulley. Take the AX34 belt and position it around the large pulley, ready for the chainsaw. Pick up the chainsaw and position it onto the plate. Loop the belt around the pulley and make sure the rear of the chainsaw is resting on the rubber pad. Make sure that the belt isn't contacting any part of the housing. Also slide the chainsaw away from the plate so that there's a gap for the belt to run between. Now grab the cover and couple it onto the chainsaw. Make sure that the belt isn't pinched between the cover and the chainsaw, and tighten it up. So now you'll need to raise the rear of the chainsaw up, which will apply a tension onto the belt. You need a good drive there. If it's too loose, you'll end up slipping the belt, wearing the belt prematurely. So prior to lifting the rear of the chainsaw, you'll need to loosen up the mounting bolts and then retightening them up after you've adjusted it. So now you're going to install the remote throttle. Note the small bracket at the throttle end that supports the cable from kinking. You also have another little bracket at the actual throttle end, which also prevents it from kinking. Place that little unit onto the handle and couple it using a pipe clamp provided. Alright, we're ready for our adjustment process. For that you'll need a level, you'll need a couple of 13 spanners, a 16 spanner, a 17 spanner, an 18 spanner, and a 19 spanner. Before we get started, we'll need to remove both vertical and horizontal riving knives. If you don't remove them, it'll be really tough to measure off the blade because they sometimes get in the way and they'll give you a false reading. So this is your first adjustment, and we call it horizontal crisscross. That's ensuring that the front of the blade and the rear of the blade is traveling in parallel with the beam. Simply place the level on the horizontal position blade and measure up from the rear to the beam. This reads 300 millimeters. And then take it around to the other side of the bar and measure up to the beam, which also reads 300 millimeters. So we now know that the blade is pretty well adjusted. If you're needing to adjust this, you can simply wind this bolt up or down, which will move the front axis up or down following a slot. So obviously moving it down will bring the front of the blade down, moving it up will bring the front of the blade up. So this is our second adjustment. It's called vertical crisscross. You'll need to swing the blade up into the vertical position, place the level onto the blade and measure to the side of the beam at one end and measure to the side of the beam at the other end. Now to adjust this, there is a horizontal slot located on the operator side of the carriage. By forcing that bolt to the right, we'll bring the rear of the blade to the right, and forcing the bolt to the left will bring the rear of the blade to the left. This is the third adjustment. We call it the horizontal lead-in. So we'll lower the frame so that the blade is roughly around 200 millimeters off the ground, and we'll position the carriage as far to the post as we can. Either end will do. I like to swing the horizontal guard up out of the way so I can place the level on the blade without it getting in the way. To simplify things, the horizontally positioned blade should be roughly parallel with your base skid. So you can place the level on the blade, maybe clamp it to it, stand back and align the level to your cross skid. However, our preference is to have a slight tilt on the horizontal blade, meaning on the cutting side of the horizontal blade, you want it to be slightly lower than the side underneath the horizontal guard, roughly about a millimeter transition. So what I do is I place the level on the cutting side of the blade and then measure down to the actual skid, not the sliding component, but the skid. And then I take the level and put it on the other side of the blade and measure down to the other side. And roughly from this exaggerated scenario, a difference of around 5 millimeters to a quarter inch is what you're looking for. That equates to about 1 millimeter at the blade. So to adjust this, you have a bolt located at the top of your carriage. By winding that bolt in, you'll reduce the tilt at the cutting side. By winding it out, you'll increase the tilt. So it's the bolt regulates how far over the blade swings, so that affects your actual adjustment. So this is your fourth adjustment, the vertical blade intersect. And it's just about bringing that vertical blade up or down so that your timber comes off nicely without drawing lines on your slab. Lower the saw down onto the block of timber within one click. Then move the timber around so that you can just score a mark onto its face. Then flip the saw up into vertical position, rotate the tooth down, and check the clearance. It should be about 2 millimeters. In this case, the vertical blade is too far down. So straight away we know if we were to cut into the log, it'll draw lines on the top of our slab. So we're going to have to raise that blade up, say 3 millimeters. You do that by adjusting the bolts on the other side of the carriage. Lowering the 2 bolts down will bring the vertical blade up. So we've adjusted the bolts down around 3 millimeters, which has brought that blade up. So it's time to test again. So we score a mark on the slab, and then we swing the blade back up. And now we can see a 2 millimeter gap, which is just about right. Before you lock the bolts up, just make sure they've been adjusted equally by placing your level on top of the bolt heads and measuring the gap on both sides of the carriage. Okay, a couple little things. Swing the horizontal guard back to its original position. Swivel the small guard over the riving knife and bolt the riving knives back on as they were. Also check that the blade screws are tight and the backing nuts are attached. Clip the water bottle into the slots and run the hose through the guard and pop it into the hose link. Your horizontal sizer has a spring underneath it. You'll need to tweak that radius a little bit. Just take it out and give it a little bit of a hit with a hammer. That'll change the arc. You need just enough tension for it to be able to move, yet resist vibration. Also, take note of the rotation to wind the saw away from the sizer. If you move it the wrong way, you've lost your reference. So now you're ready to saw. You'll first need to align the beam to the center of your log. That's to maximize your recovery. So you'll need to raise the saw up and to the left, ready for your first cut. You're ready to start the chainsaw up. So turn your choke on, turn the saw on, press the compression switch, and give it a pull. Okay, once it's popped, you'll need to take the choke out and give it another start. Right, so right there, this and that, 3, I use the push, that hand, throttle with that hand. Alright, so we've taken the top off the log. Now we've got a face to read. So looking over the face, we're looking for horizontal crisscross. That was our first adjustment. We want front radials and rear radials forming a cross. The other thing to look for is as the saw moves on and off the slab, you don't want it to resaw. So as it exits the log, and if you were to bring it back through the cut, it doesn't reskim. It should just exit cleanly and slide straight back on cleanly without resawing. Now we're going to test for the horizontal lead-in relating to the third adjustment discussed earlier. Lower the bush on the sizing device to the curved line and lower it one click at both ends, remembering to loosen and lock the post locks. To test for horizontal lead, what you'll need to do is a shallow horizontal cut. Once completed, you'll move the saw over a further 6-inch horizontal cut. Between the two cuts, you should see a line. If the line doesn't exist, it means you haven't got enough lead. If the line is too heavy, you've got too much lead. We're looking for about 0.5 millimeters of a difference, leaving a small 0.5 millimeter line in between. As you can see here, you can see the first cut. It's around 2 inches deep. Then we made a 6-inch cut. In between the two cuts, you can see a small line, roughly 0.5 millimeters. Now that's spot on. Now we're looking at the fourth adjustment relating to the intersect. As you can see, there's a 2 millimeter square left between the two cuts. That's bang on, so there's no need to adjust that either. The final thing that we check for is vertical crisscross. That's relating to the number 2 adjustment. Now we do this in 2 stages. We lower the saw down 4 inches, we do a cut, we make sure that we're getting good crisscross on the side face of that cut, and that the saw exits cleanly without zinging. Once we're assured that that's correct, then we lower it another 4 inches to do our final 8-inch cut. So we do it in increments so that there's no risk of burning the blade. As you can see here, we've lowered it 8 inches now. The saw is relatively easy to pull through the log. It's not bogging down, and it's leaving good crisscross. So we've pretty much gone through all the adjustments, and we've got it spot on, ready for some real work. Thank you very much for watching our video. Hopefully it's been able to help you out. And remember, if you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to call our factory here in New Zealand.